We're going to go on Daf Mesechtes Gitin Daf Samach Vav. We begin on the bottom of Samachim and Beis, three lines up from the bottom of the Yomid, where the Gemara begins a discussion that will relate back to the halacha of our Mishnah. And our Mishnah that we just had started discussed the theme of this parak regarding shlichus of the husband of the wife, regarding writing the get, and the Mishnah had described the case regarding if someone was being taken out in chains, and he says, write a get to my wife. And we'll actually see the contrast in a later Mishnah on this daf regarding, well, he only said write it, didn't say give it. Says the Mishnah, no, he means to write and to give it. And then they even said someone that goes out to the sea and someone that goes on a journey, and even someone, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says, even if he's in danger of his life, also we said that it's going to be, that it's considered like as if he said that it should be done, even though he didn't actually say that. Today's daf. Some discussing today's daf, like we just mentioned, the cases of a yitz b'kailer, someone goes out in chains, or hamafarish, if someone goes out by sea, or by yitz b'shiyach, goes out in a caravan, that we say that even though he said just write, he means to write and to give it. And the Gemara discussed regarding Mishal Yemushlich Labar. The next Mishnah talks about if someone's in a pit, and he says, whoever listens to me should write a get to my wife, they're going to write and to give it, even though they don't know who he is, and we're not concerned that maybe he's a shin dalet. The next Mishnah talks about, in contrast to our Mishnah, which was a dying person, if he just says, or someone that's in danger of his life, or he's perturbed, and he says, just write. If a healthy person says, just write to get to my wife, well, that's very different. That he's just making a joke. He's just playing around with her. The Gemara has a discussion regarding Mashvi Inshi Bro Shlicha B'Makam Abo. Does a person make a son, a shlich, when the father's there, or if the father and son are there, he doesn't mean the son, he will only mean the father, and the Gemara makes a machlekes regarding that. What happens if someone says to two people, give a get to my wife? What is he essentially telling them? Who should do what? Which is a very tedious discussion in the Gemara regarding mili loymimser and l'shliach. Could words be given over to an agent that he could then go and give that over to someone else? So when you tell two people or three people, tell them to do something, are you telling them that they could give that over to someone else? How could they give that over? That's words. Can you give words over to someone else? And then Ba'imo Amru is a specific case when you tell him to tell someone else. Would that be a different type of halacha or not? So beginning our daf, the bottom of Samachim Beis, we had said in the Mishnah that if someone goes out to be taken in chains to be executed, so when he tells his wife, he says, write this get for my wife, it doesn't mean just to write it, it means to give it also, not just to write it. So the Gemara brings a story, Geniva, that was the name of the individual. He was going out in chains, and that's where it's like related to Allah of Mishnah about being taken out in chains. So Kihava Konofik Omar, when he was being taken out, he said, Havu Arba Meya Zuzi L'Rebavina. Give 400 zuz to Ravina, Mei Chamra, from the wine that I have, Dinahar Panya, that's by the river Panya. That's what he said. Omer Reb Zeira says, Gitin Daf Samach Vav Med Aleph, Daughter Rebavina L'Silte. Rebavina should load up his basket on his shoulder for the food he's going to need to have for his journey, because he should go to his teacher Rav Huna, because based on his word and his teaching, Ravina will merit in the gift that this Geneva was giving him without a kinyan, because he didn't give him any kinyan. He just says, give it to him. If he carries his basket to Rav Huna, his Rebbe, he'll merit in that gift. What does that mean? Because Rav Huna said in Perek Mishal, so later on, the Ayin Beis and Beis, he made the following comparison. He said, Gitoi, the divorce document of a dying person, is kematnosai, is like his gift. That is, mamatnosai, just like his gift. Im amad chayzer, we know a shchivmera has a unique halacha. Shchivmera, just with his words, the halacha kinyan happens. But if he survives, that was not the intention. He was only giving away everything because he thought he was dying. If he survives, he backs out. Avkita, so to his divorce document, im amad chayzer, if he gets up, if he doesn't die, he backs out, then his wife is not divorced. Oh, so from that you could learn that also for this situation to tell you the following comparison. Omar Gita, just like his get, even though he doesn't specify. And this is the halacha we said in our Mishnah. Even though Amr Kasvo, once he says write it, even though he didn't say give it, the Mishnah said the halacha is going to be that is going to be valid. Oh, so you could take this same comparison that Rav Huna's Rebbe makes and say the same thing over here. Af matanase, also his gift, which was the story with Geneva of a yitzvah koiler going out in chains, even the amatnu, since he says give it, even though he didn't acquire it, you actually would give it a very similar parallel. So he says, let him go to his Rebbe, and then he'll be Zeicher Bavina if from this gift that Geniva didn't actually make a kinyan, but he said give it. That's the same thing when by the get you say kisvu, even though you didn't say tnu. Here also you said give it, even though you didn't make a kinyan. Should be a parallel for this that it'll work. What do you mean? You told about the halacha of our Mishnah? Yeah, by a shchimera. A shchimera, if a shchimera gives a get and he survives, so the halacha is that it's not going to be considered as a get. Well, you want to know if he actually wrote it and gave it? We're talking about like a guy is dying and he's saying on his deathbed. Right, so that's right. So the Gemara is going to ask a similar question right now regarding he can't give a get la'achar misa, but well, it's going to be al t'nai. It's like al t'nai, like when you do on the condition that if I don't, like as if he said, right.
But it only takes a second before he dies.
Or it's going to be only if he dies. Exactly right. So Masler Rabba asks, however, on this teaching of Rav Huna, he says, wait a second. I mean, basically, like we were just discussing right now, you're really comparing anything between matana and get? Then you should say, ima matana, if you find by get, yesh lachamisa, that works after a person dies, af get yesh lachamisa, then you should say, oh, the get should also word lachamisa. Not the Gemara says, hachastik, how could you compare the two? Bishlam matana eats a lachamisa. We understand by get, by matana, it works lachamisa. Like some actually girsais have the words, as we learned in the Mishnah on the first parak on Daf Yud Gimel and Aleph, of Tenu Mana Leplainu Meis, Yitnu Lachamisa, you give it Lachamisa. But get Lachamisa Meika, is there such a thing as get Lachamisa? In other words, after a person dies, who's divorcing her? From the moment that he dies, she has to go ahead and have Yibum. And for this teaching, how are you going to compare the two of them? In other words, that's not a difficulty on Reb Zera that was comparing the two halachas. There's no application by get. So therefore, don't ask to say that it should be working Lachamisa. So the Gemara says, no, Ela Rebaba, that wasn't his question. You're right. Rather, his difficulty on Reb Zera was that Reb Zera wanted to say Reb Avina could acquire this gift of Geneva, even though there was no kinyan, by comparing to this concept of the halacha of our Mishnah, that even though he just said kids were not tenu, it's going to work. But my problem is with the story with Geneva is for a different angle. It's matna shchimera b'miktzasi. It's a partial gift of a dying person, where Geneva didn't give away everything. He left over some things for himself. When the dying person is giving over a gift, when it's on partial of his assets, he needs to have a kinyan, because that's how the Gemara comes out about Basid from a base, that since he's leaving over something for himself, obviously he's not giving a command because of his death, because he's still concerned about leaving over something for himself. So that's like the gift of a healthy person. So therefore, that was Rabba's question to say, well, how can you say that based on Rav Huna's teaching it should work, even if you're going to consider him for this halacha of Yotze B'Koiler, of Shchimra, however you want to say it, but that would only be if you're giving everything, not if you're giving some of it. So says the Gemara, so yeah, that's a good question. Machal Rav Huna Saba, is that to further Rav Huna held Loy Boy Kinyan? That you don't need to have a kinyan, even though the Shchimra or the Yotze B'Koiler, this Geneva, was only giving part of the stuff, but Vakailan to buy a kinyan. We know that the halacha is that you do need to have a kinyan. So the Gemara says, no, Shani Hacha here by Geneva is different because the Mitzvah Machmas Misahu. That even though you're right, he didn't give away everything, but he knew he's going on chains to be executed, and therefore he's not backing out, even if he's going to survive. He was commanded because of his death. So therefore, although generally by Shchimra, it's only if he's giving away everything, is he revealing that he thinks he's dying, and therefore that's what he's giving it for, and therefore it's going to work even without a kinyan. But here by Geneva, where he's going out in chains, is really the equivalent, and even though he didn't give away everything, would still have the same halacha. So then the Gemara asked the other way. Okay, Machal de Rabba Sabar. So is that to infer that Rabba held that mitzvah machmas misa, that when you're commanding because of death, that boy kinyan, that you do need to have a kinyan? And that was his question on Reb Zera to say, hey, wait a second, how are you saying that that Reb Avin is gonna acquire? But we know the halacha is that you don't need to have a kinyan. So what was his question saying? Oh, I find this difficult. How can you compare? It's only partial of the stuff that he's giving away. Who cares? It's mitzvah machmas misa. So the Gemara says, okay, you're right. That wasn't his question, not before and not this. Really, Rabba had a different difficulty. How could Rabbi Zera say that Rabbi Avina should acquire this gift of the 400 zuz worth of wine of Geneva? But Chamra, when he said, give him wine in the worth of 400 zuz, loy kamar, he didn't say, give him wine, and Demei Chamra, and the money of wine, meaning give him 400 zuz of the money of wine, to say that you should sell the wine and give it to him, that also loy kamar didn't say. So he didn't say Chamra, and he didn't say Demei Chamra. What did he say? He said, Mei Chamra kamar, from the wine. Now, the way Rashi says, it's interesting, that money from wine, you can't give him, because you can't make money out of wine. So he said, the words were, Hava Abba Me'ezuz L'Rabavina, Mechamr Dena Papanya. Give him 400 zuz from the wine that I have. You can't give 400 zuz for money. If he would have said, Chamra, fine, give him Chamra. If he would have said, Dmei Chamra, give him the money of Chamra. But you can't give 400 zuz from wine. Very literalist type of way of translation, but you can't take 400 zuz from wine. So that was his difficulty. But Ve'idach, Rabbi Zera, who did compare and said, yes, he could be Zeicha in the 400 zuz, Meichamra, this that he said from the wine, the reason why he didn't specify not Chamra or Demei Chamra, and he said Meichamra, was Kedeliapas's Koicha. He actually just Geneva wanted to strengthen Rabbi Avina's ability that all of his wine should be as insurance and responsible for this gift. Meaning, like Rashi explains, if he would have said, give him wine, which would have been Chamra, if it would have fermented from the wine 100 barrels, the inheritors would have said, oh, Rabbi Avina, it was your wine that soured. So he didn't want to just say 400 zuz of Chamra, because then they could say that was yours. And had he said, Demei Chamra, the money of the wine, and if they would have sold some of the wine and some of the money would have been lost, they would have said, your money was lost. So therefore, he said, Mei Chamra, which that sounds like the wine and its monies, which everything is responsible for ensuring that gift. And that's why he said 400 zuz from the wine. And Shalcha B'tam, they sent from over there from Eretz Yisrael. Yes, Mei Chamra from the wine is to strengthen his power and to allow him to collect from all of the wine and all of the monies.
I think the guy being carried out in chains wasn't very much within his language.
I mean, you want to say that maybe his wording
His
would not.
intent was give the man the money.
Right. Shaila is what is it that he was thinking or whatever. But sometimes in halacha we do say that a person's words has halachic significance. So you have to know, are we saying his intent? Are we saying that's what his words actually mean? It's something that comes up in a lot of different sugyas. That are we translating what he was saying, what he meant, or what his words ultimately hold a weight? Oh, in general, the 400. Was that also, they were only giving it, if it's a guzman, how much will get, you know what I'm saying? So now the Gemara continues the next Mishnah, again, continue on the theme of shlichus, which is the theme of this parak, of writing a get. Says the Mishnah, Misha Yemushluch Lebar, someone was thrown into a pit. He says, Kala Shemeas Kailai, whoever hears his voice, and he says his name, the name of his city, his uncle from Slavostad, and he says, Yichtav Gela Ishtu, should write a get to his wife. The halacha is they're going to write and they're going to give it to the wife. So the Gemara says, okay, let's be concerned that maybe he's a demon. How do you know that this is a real person? Amar Bihudi says, where they see a figure of a person. So the Gemara says, sometimes the Shadim, they make themselves also appear in the form of a person. So how do you know the guy next to you, right? Is not also, he might be also a Shindalid. Right, so we're gonna actually see a story later on the later daf with Shloimy Melech, that the famous story with Ashmedai, that he is a chvashtelt as Rabbi Shloimy Melech. Right. Yeah. So, but first the Gemara is saying that how do you know here in the pit? It would seem that in the city that you probably wouldn't suspect that, because like Taisus says that that it sounds like that you're not usually suspecting, but in these Shadim like to hang out in these dark alleyways, in these pits or whatever this and that. So when it's in the pits, So mefrektim, maybe Taki is a shindal. So it says no. He appears like a person, but they also appear like a person. So Gemara says, yeah, the chazle bavur, talking about where you see his shadow. The Gemara says, in an amis bavur, they also have a shadow. So the chazle bavur. You see the shadow of the shadow. That's only by a human being. So the Gemara says, v'dilma in an amis. How do you know? Maybe shindals also have a shadow of a shadow. And Chanina says, no, lemdeinu yonis b'ni. That's one gersa or yonis sheda. Either it's yonis the demon or my son yonis. Meaning that as he taught me, bavur islahu, they have a shadow, but bavur the bavur leslahu. They don't have a shadow of a shadow. So the Gemara says, okay, but b'dilma tzarihi. Maybe this is actually an interesting story, a story of deceit. Maybe the co-wife of this woman was intending to ruin her co-wife because she wants her to get married with this quote-unquote get, but really it wasn't the husband. She was just impersonating her husband, and she wants her co-wife to become forbidden because she gets married to someone else. So maybe that's who's screaming out from this pit. So it says the Gemara, turn the Rabbi Shloimo, turn the Brayso Rabbi Shloimo, that b'shas hasakana, during a time of danger, for example, in this situation where someone is in danger of dying, because like Rashi says the words vim lo achshav emasai, and if not now, then when? Because if the guy dies, he's in the pit and he fell on his head, and who knows what happened, then then you're going to write and you're going to give it even though you don't recognize if this is the guy who's saying his name. Yes, you're right. You do have reasons to be concerned. Maybe that should be the case. But again, we don't say that. We say that we're going to rely on the reality that this woman might be an aguna, and therefore we will go ahead and instead of suspecting maybe it's the sister, this co-wife, they will write the get for that woman. Now, continuing with the next Mishnah, continuing the theme of the Mishnah 2 Mishnahs ago that had mentioned this idea about persons going out to die. And he said just right. So we said, he means to write and to give it because the guy's just not in his right frame of mind. He's about to be executed. He's going on a difficult journey. So he's going in some submarine. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? So therefore, he says right, but he means write and give it. But says the Mishnah, in contrast, habari shama, a regular healthy person. He says, "Kiss we get leishti." Hey guys, write a get to my wife. Says the Mishnah, rotza l'sachik bo. He's laughing. He's just taunting her. He's just making a joke out of her because he didn't say give it. Now the Mishnah says, "Ma'isa b'bari echad shama." There was a story with a healthy person that said, "Kiss we get leishti." Write a get to my wife. Va'ol reish hagag. They went up to the top of the roof. V'nafalo meis. Seems like in Talmudic times the chosen way of suicide was going to the top of a roof and dying. They didn't have such options, I guess. Like we have, but they went to the top of the roof and he died. Amr B'Shem says, if he fell from himself, meaning no one threw him, hariz a get. So then it's going to be a get because that obviously was his intention from the beginning, and the end proves his point. And essentially, it's like the prior Mishnah of Mefarish, the guy who went on a journey or Masukah in the danger of his life. Now, if he's doing some construction on his roof, and then the wind came and blew him off, then and again, it wouldn't be a get. It would be like a regular healthy person. It would be happenstance or serendipity, depends which way you look at it, for where this guy just happened to die, but that was not the intent of the person necessarily. So the Gemara wonder says, wait a second, Maitza Lister? You're bringing a story to contradict. In other words, that's not usually how a Mishnah works. The ratio of the Mishnah says that if a healthy guy says, right against my wife, he's just making a joke, he's making a mockery out of her, he didn't say anything, and then you tell me that there's a difference if he fell by himself or if a wind blew him off, I thought it's nothing. So the Gemara says, no, the word missing from the Mishnah, this is how it's supposed to say. If, however, although he's a healthy person, if the end proves regarding the beginning that we see that evidently he really wanted it to be given and he was ending his life, hariz a get, then it will be a get. And there's a story also by a healthy person that said, right, I get to my wife. He went up to the top of the roof of Nafal and he felt his death. And he died. He says, if he fell from his own volition, a get can be a get. If the wind blew him up, then there's not going to be a get. But that's what the Mishnah was not contradicting, but it was qualifying this halacha and saying it depends, that sometimes we could tell that really that was his intent, and then there will be a get. Now the Gemara brings a story, who gavra the alabe kanishta. There's a certain person that went to a shul, and ashkach makre yinuku ubrei diyasbi. He found a school teacher, a teacher of young children, and his son that was sitting. Yosef in the shachrin gabai, and there was another person sitting with them. There's three people sitting: a father and a son, a malamed with his son, and another person. Amalu, so this person walks into shul, sees three people sitting. They're having chavrusa, they're sitting and learning, and he says to them, "Look, beit menaichu, two of you, nichtavu gita ledebesu. I want you to write a get for my wife." And l'saif shachav makri yanuka. The end of the story was that the Rebbe, the Malamed, he passed away. So what's the question? So the Gemara says like this: Mi mashru inchi, would a person go ahead and make bra shlicha b'makam abba, a son as an agent in the place where the father is? In other words, that he was not particular which one, and in the beginning, he also was making the son as a shliach. Now that the father passed away, no problem, let the son and this other person, the third person, go and give a get to his wife, because what happened was that the husband went overseas. So he can't give it anymore. He can't redesignate it anymore. So he's already way far gone. Question is, could the son and this third person give the get? Or maybe not. Would we say that a person would not make a son a shliach b'makam abba? The tata is there, you're not making a son as a shliach. So Rav Nachman Amei says, a person would not make a son as an agent where the father is. So as the Taisus Rid says over here in the bottom line, he says, so that means in the beginning his intent was only for the father and for this other third person. And now that the father died, the whole shlichus is gone. And the son and this third person cannot give the get. Papa says, no, it's not true. Mashri inshi bra shliach makam abba. A person would make a son a shliach even though the father is there. And the Rabbi says, yes, hilchas halach is mashvi inshi bra shliach makam abba. A person would make a son in the shliach makam abba. The Gemara doesn't tell us or Rashi why you would make a son or not make a son. Is it because of covet or whatever? It doesn't tell us exactly. But al kapanim, that seems to be the machlekes. Would you do that? And the Gemara seems to come out that the person would appoint a son, and therefore, even though the father's dead, you could go ahead and make the get and give it to the wife. Now the Gemara continues with the halacha, the next Mishnah, that continues on the shlichus to make a get. Here it gets a little bit more complex, and the wording is going to be very delicate to know exactly what is it that's being executed over here. Amal Shnai. So it's what? Right, so actually that's some of what we're going to discuss shortly. But here he said to two of them, that was his shlichus, he wanted two of them to do it. And if it's not two of them, it's not what he had said to execute and to do it. Now, that's actually the theme a little bit that we're going to touch on right now. And every word here is a little bit precise. And Amul Shnayim, specifically two people. He tells two people, to get le'ishti, give a get to my wife. So Rashi explains, although he didn't say, write and give it, he just said, give a get to my wife. The halacha is, they have to sign it, and this we're going to get a little bit delicate here. What does it mean to write a get? When you tell two people to write a get, so it can mean one of two things. It can mean either to actually sign it, because that's one part of writing, and then there's the actual writing. Meaning, when you talk about writing a get, what do you mean by writing a get? Do you mean signing? And we're going to discuss this shortly, or do you mean the writing of the text of the get? So for simplistic purposes right now, Rashi is explaining that when you tell two people to give a get to my wife, even though he didn't say that I want you to write it and to give it, they themselves have to write it. What does that mean, write it? They have to sign it themselves. They have to be the ones who are authenticating the get by signing on it. Moreover, they're not allowed to tell other witnesses to sign, because since there are only two people, the husband didn't make them into a court to then be able to command others. He made them into witnesses. That's why he said, two people, you guys give a get. What do you mean you guys give a get to my wife? You're the witnesses. The witnesses are wada kiveya, the get. Now, as Rashi says, the Gemara will explain what's with the writing of the actual get document itself. Could they command a scribe who's someone else to write it? Or do they themselves have to write it? That we'll discuss. But what the Mishnah is coming to tell us right now, when you tell two people, give a get to my wife, it's not just that they're going to give it like a UPS driver. No, they're going to have to actually write the get. What does write mean? To sign the get. They're going to have to be the Edom on the get. Okay, that's one case. All he has Gitin Daf is l'shleisha. This is going to have the same halacha. That's why the Mishnah doesn't yet say what the halacha is. Let's say he tells three people. And by the three people, he says, Kisvu get, utunu leishti. Write the get and give this get to my wife. So although that there are three people and they're appropriate to be a bezdin and essentially tell other people to do it, but since he explicitly told them, kisvu, write it, he's saying, I'm not making you into a bezdin, I'm making you into the witnesses who they're the ones who write it and sign on it. So the halacha of these two cases is, again, when you tell two people give, or when you tell three people write and give, they have to write it and they have to give it. That's these two cases.
Did it get in front of the case then?
No, you don't have to.
So what's the nafkamina?
Nafkamina is actually the next case.
Havamina.
Right, so the next, nafkamina is the next case. If he says to three people, and this is very specific, Tenu get leishti. He didn't say kisbu. He said, give a get to my wife. Oh, here it's different. And specifically because it's three, and because he didn't say kisbu. Those three people can tell other people, to other witnesses, to write and to sign it, and to give it. Why? Because he made them into a court. A court can execute it, not themselves. They can then dictate to other people to do it. So that's the significance of three people when he didn't say kisvu. Now, this was a halacha, the Heller Reb Chanina, Ish Oinoi, that he brought out, Mebeis Asurim from jail, in the name of Rabbi Kiva, because as the Gemara brings in Erevin of Chafal from Mebeis, Rabbi Kiva was locked up in jail, and he visited Rabbi Kiva, and he asked him this question, and he brought out this halacha, that Mekubal that Rabbi Kiva had said, I have a tradition, when someone says to three people, to get leishti, give a get to my wife, but they could tell others to write it, and the reason they shall some bezin because he made them into a bezin. That's the halacha of Reb Meir. However, Amr Rabbi Yasi said, "Numeinu l'shliach." We said to that agent, meaning to Reb Chanina, who he was a shliach in this halacha from the jail to say it over the Mesa Medrash. We told him, no. Afanu mukabam. We also have a tradition, not like you. That even if a husband says to the great court, there's an ed in Yerushalayim, and he says to nu get leishti, this wording doesn't say right. He says give a get to my wife. If they don't know how to write, sheyilmadu, they have to learn how to write until they write it themselves. No, they have to write it and they have to give it. Not like Reb Meir said. Meir said, oh, they're a bezdin. They could tell other people. No, not true. We have a tradition that even the great bezdin Yerushalayim, if they were told to know, they have to themselves write it and give it to the wife. Now continues the Mishnah, Amala Asaga. If someone says to 10 people, Kisvu v'tenu get leishti. So obviously it's for these people. But the question is, when you tell them to write, everyone should write? 10 pens? What are they doing over here? I mean, they have to write, obviously, like everyone would agree. But what does it mean when you tell them to write and to give it to my wife? So echad kaisev, one writes, Vishnayim chaysim, and two signs. So it's from them. It can't be other people. Not everybody has to write. Not everybody has to sign. One of them will write. Two of them will sign, which is the minimum amount of edim. But let's say it says kulchim kaslev. It says I want you all to write. But hey, how can they all write? So the halach is it means echad kaisev b'kulam chaysim. And one guy writes, and they all have to sign because it said kulchem. The figure therefore in meis echem, if one of them dies, it doesn't get bottled. That's it. The get is bottled because that's what he said. His stipulation was that every one of them should be writing, which again means signing. Now, explaining the Mishnah, the Gemara brings Amar b'Yomri ba'Abba. It says Sholchu le'mi bei Rav l'Shmuel. They sent from the yeshiva of Rav to Shmuel the following question: Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu. Let our teacher teach us the following case. Amar l'shnaim. If a husband says to two people, Kisvu utnu get leishti. I want you to write, and I want you to give this get to my wife. Okay. Then what happened was like this. V'amru la sefer v'chasav. Then they told the scribe to write it, and he wrote it. V'chas muhein. And they signed it. Ma, what's the halacha? What's the question? So we already alluded to this when we quoted Rashi in the Mishnah. When the Mishnah told us that when you tell them, two people, to write and give a get to my wife, that they have to write it themselves, was that going on the signing, and here they signed it? Or was it going on the writing of the actual text of the get, and they didn't? So it would not be valid. That's the Gemara's question. When yichtivu ba'atzman, what does yichtivu mean? Does yichtivu mean they signing it? Because that's what they was. We don't care who wrote the text. We mean to say, vem mach the get, that this is the signing, or doesn't mean the writing itself. So Shmuel sent to them, if she got married with such a get, Tate say she has to leave because of the doubt, because we're not sure if this get would be kosher or not. And and this teaching still needs to be learned and analyzed. In other words, it's not clear to us, and we have to learn from the greater ones than us if it would be kosher or not. That was. What do you mean different?
The question was,
yeah, I mean, right. Yeah. So here for sure, everyone would agree it has to be them. It's even more severe than the Mishnah. Mishnah didn't even say kiss, we just said tznu, and we said that obviously means kiss also. But this that we said in the Mishnah, yichtavu la'atzman, which for sure would apply also over here, what would yichtavu mean? Would yichtavu mean that they have to just sign, or would it mean that they have to also write it? So yeah, for sure it's going to be included in that halacha. But the question is, what does yichtavu include? So Shmuel says, yeah, Taka, we don't know. It is a suffix. So the Gemara says, my hadaber tzarach Talmud. What is this that Shmuel is saying that this has to still be learned up? What was Shmuel in doubt regarding this? So it gets a little bit complex over here. Says the Gemara like this: if you think to say, because this is what's called words. What happened is the husband. What did he give? What did he tell to these two people? He said words. He said do something. He didn't give over an object. He says write and give this get to my wife. That was words. And he's not sure regarding mili, regarding words. Could words be given over to a shliach, and therefore it's going to be kosher? Because these words that were said to this shliach, if he wants to, he could give it over to another shliach. So when you told these two people to write, no problem. Those words I could give over to someone else, and that Sefer could write it. Or can they not be given over to an agent? And therefore it's going to be puzzle, because like Rashi explains over here, what did he give them? Just mili b'alma, just words. And they can't go back and give over those words to a scribe. As Rashi said, it's not similar to, which we know, we've said already in this Masechta, that when one shliach can't go, he passes on to another shliach, and then to another shliach, another shliach. We said over there, because that's an actual get. You can give it over to another shliach. But here, words, you can't give over words. That was what Shmuel was not sure about. He wasn't sure, could mili be mimsal l'shliach or not. Says Gemara, that was his suffix? It can't be. Because Amar Shmuel says that Rabbi says, halacha Rabbi Yosi, halacha follows like Rabbi Yosi, that of our Mishnah. The Amar, what did he say? Mili lemimsar l'shliach. If you recall, we said just before, earlier on this Amid, Rabbi Yosi had said, we said to the shliach, we have a tradition that even the Bez Nagali B'Shalayim, if they're told, give a get to my wife, they got to learn how to write, and they got to write, and they got to give it themselves. Because you can't hand it over to anyone else. I don't give you the biggest Bez in the whole world. Bezin, yeah, could usually give things over, but not Mili. Mili cannot be given over. So wait a second. If Shmuel paskins like Rabbi Yosi of our Mishnah, the words cannot be given over to a shliach. So what was Shmuel in doubt regarding this halacha? It seems pretty clear that it would not be a good get, because Mili lemimsun l'shliach. The other rather says, no, you're right. It was a different question there. He was in doubt. The Shmuel hakam abayle. What he was wondering was as follows: Hai kesayvum, this that he told them, to these two people, write and give it. What did you mean kesayvu? This is really how we were explaining all along from before. Iksav yadan, was it their handwriting, meaning their signature, what he was saying? And Lamaisa, they signed it themselves. Iksav haget, or was it referring to the writing of the get, and that they did not write? That was Shmuel's suffix. When he's telling them, I want you guys to be kaisiv, what does kaisiv mean? Does it mean writing their signature, or does it mean writing the get? Oh, says the Gemara, that was his question. But why can't you resolve it from the halacha of our Mishnah? Why would he see it in our Mishnah? So our Mishnah said like this: if you tell two people, tnu get leishti, give a get to my wife. Oy l'shlosh, and this is the case we want to bring Uriah from. Or you said to three people, kisvu get utnu leishti, write a get and give it to my wife. What did the Mishnah say in that case? Harelu yichtavu v'yitnu. They have to write it and give it. Wait a second. You see, when he says kisvu, they have to write it. So you see, they have to write the get. Says, what are you talking about? Higuva coming by late. That's the case in Mishnah I myself would ask on. Kesayvu, when the Mishnah says that they have to write it. What does it mean they have to write? Ksav Yadanu? Does it mean they have to write their own handwriting, meaning their signature? Like Ksav Gethu? Or does it mean writing of the get? So don't tell me right from the Mishnah. That's exactly the question over there also. So the Gemara says, wait a second. Pshita the Ksav Gethu. It's obvious it'd be referring to writing the get. You know why? Because the Tani Sefer. Look a little further in the Mishnah. Mishnah said, Omer B'Yesi, he said, we said to the Shleich Min Reb Chanina, that he came from Rebbe Kiva from jail with a tradition. He says, we also have a tradition, not like you. Our tradition was that even if someone says to the great court in Yerushalayim, Tenu get leishti, give a get to my wife. That what's the halacha? They have to learn the yichdevu b'yitnula, and they have to write it and they have to give it to her. So he says the following raya. He says, wait a second. If you say that what's this halacha of yichdevu? It means ksav hagerhu. It means the writing of the actual text of the document of the get. So Shape, it would definitely make sense that would be the chiddush of Rabbi Yesi's tradition, that the Bezdin maybe might not know how to write the text of a get, but you got to learn how to do it. Because you got to write the get itself, because that's what yichtabu means. If you say ksav yadanu, that what does it mean that they have to write it? Means they have to write it themselves, meaning not the get, but they have to be the Eidim and they have to sign their own names. Come on. Is there a court that doesn't know how to sign their name? And you're saying the Bezdin not going to be Yerushalayim, they have to learn how to write. Come on, if they've been writing the get, they don't know how to write a get. They're not malumad yet, whatever. But regarding signing their name, obviously yichtavu means to say the right to get itself, and that's what saying they have to learn how to do it. So that answers our question. So what is Shmuel finding difficult that he's not sure, and then Teitzim is Safik and the Davar Tzarech Talmud? What's Davar Tzarech? Look at the Mishnah. It's clear. It's referring to writing the get. Says no, it's not true. Yes, it could be din echad. It could be a new court that never learned how to sign their name yet, and therefore it's not a raya. Could be yichtavu means to say writing their signatures and not the text, so it's not a raya for this doubt that Shmuel had. But then the Gemara continues to ask and says, wait a second. If you're going to think to say that when it says to write, that's the halacha in these cases, that it means ksav yadanu, it means their signature. Okay, so then the inference is hakasef haged. So then if the get is written, if they tell the sefer to write it and he writes it, you're telling me kosher, it's going to be kosher? That's what you're entertaining to say would be the halacha, because you're not sure. Maybe yichtuva means they only have to write their signature and not write the get itself. But Shmuel said, and this is the same Shmuel who is not sure about the halacha, he says, Amar Rabbi, halacha krib yesi. So here's a little bit of a complex raya. He says, halacha is a krib yesi of the Mishnah. Now, since Shmuel explains that the reasoning of Rabbi Yesi is the Amad that he says, Mili leilei mimsrin l'shliach, the words cannot be given over to a shliach. So wait a second. How could this case of Shmuel be kosher, but you're giving over words? If you're telling me the halacha is like Rabbi Yesi, and Rabbi Yesi in the Mishnah says, Mili leilei mimsrin l'shliach, so how could you tell me? You tell me the suffix wasn't if mili mimsrin l'shliach or not. That you already entertained early in the Gemara, and you told me no. Clearly, he holds that mili is le mimsrin l'shliach because he paskins like Rabbi Yesi. So he said he had a different suffix. He wasn't sure what does yichtuv mean in the Mishnah. Do they have to actually write the text, or do they have to just sign the name? But what does that mean? You're telling me if they only have to write their name, that means to say they're telling a sefer to write the text. How could you tell a sefer to write the text? That's mili. So how would that even make sense? How could you entertain to say yichtibu means that you only have to write the signature? And who has to write the get? Oh, someone else can write it. Well, how is this other person how is this someone else gonna write it? Oh, I'm gonna tell him. You're gonna tell him? That's mili. Mili, you're paskin like Rabbi Yesi, like. Why didn't I ask it before? Well, when before? We're middle. No, because then we had entertained to say that Shmuel's suffix was, could mili be mimsrin l'shliach or not? That's what the Gemara originally. No, that couldn't be the suffix because we said he paskins like Rabbi Yesi that mili cannot be mimsrin l'shliach. So we fell off of that option of saying that Shmuel is obviously not sure about something over here. He says Davar Tzarech Talmud. What's his suffix? So we thought first originally he wasn't sure could words be given over to a shliach or not. That's a suffix. So like here they gave it over to someone else. Is that going to work or not? So he says no, clearly not, because he said passing like Rabbi Yesi that words cannot be given over. Okay, let's come up with a new suffix. What's a new suffix? When it says you have to write, what does writing mean? Does writing mean the text, or does writing mean their signature? It says, yeah, but wait a second. Even if it meant to write their signature and the text they don't have to, well, who's writing the text? Some cipher, some third-party cipher? Who's authorizing him? You? You're giving over words. How could you give over words? Words are not, you can't give over words. So they said, wait a second. If we would hold and we would take it as a dava pashat, when it says in the Mishnah that they have to write, or when he tells them to write, it means to say ksav yad, who it means only their handwriting, meaning their signature. Then you could say that yes, but regarding ksav haget, the writing of the get itself, and the fact that he wasn't particular about that, because that's not what he meant when he said write. When he said write, he meant only their signature, not the writing of the text. It's nasa ka'omer amru. So these are interesting words, oimer amru, but it's as if he said to tell the scribe and let him write. And the Gemara assumes right now that a Moed Rabbi Yisrael agrees, but oimer amru. When you say to say, when I'm telling you to tell someone else, then you could give over words. So although Rabbi Yisrael paskin our Mishnah, he cannot give over words to someone else, but if he's telling you to give it over, then that will work. And since he's only telling you, if we're going to explain, Shmuel was not sure, but if we're going to explain that when he says to write it, he meant the writing of your signature, not the writing of the text, essentially he's telling you, well, I don't care who writes it. Oh yeah, go and tell someone else. Oh, telling someone to tell someone, that will work. That you could authorize someone to do. It's just in general, when you give over words, without him to specify, you cannot give over. Says the Gemara, wait a second, is that really so? Does Rabbi Yisrael really agree by Omer Amru that you could do that? But now, in the Mishnah Peizayin, the Mishnah says, again, these are a lot of technical details over here, but Ksav Sefer, the writing of the scribe of the get, the aid, and a witness who signed, so you have the scribe who wrote, and you have one witness who signed, says the Mishnah Peizayin, kasher to me kasher. But wait a second. He says, although the Mishnah's words are Ksav Sefer, the writing of the scribe, Chasam Sefer Shenino. It actually means to say the scribe signed. Meaning if the scribe signed as a witness and there's another witness with him, then it's going to be kasher. Okay. Rav Chizda says, Masnit in the Mishnah that validates the signing of the scribe and the get, Mani who's the Tana, Rabbi Yesi, it's Rabbi Yesi. Dama that he says, Mili loy mimsrin l'shliach. That words cannot be given over to shliach. What? What does that have to do with this? The scribe signing with one aid that's dependent on Rabbi Yesi's halacha that words cannot be given over to shliach? So Rashi explains. What's the significance? Therefore, no one signs on a get unless he heard directly from the husband's mouth himself, because a shliach cannot tell aidim to sign on that person's get, because you can't give over words. So the word had to be coming straight from the husband. Ooh, so therefore we don't have to be concerned over here for what? What would the concern be? Maybe the husband didn't tell the sefer to sign. Maybe he told the shliach to tell the sefer to write and other people to sign. Now, the shliach was concerned the sefer is going to be embarrassed to say, wait a second, what am I, chopped liver? Why can't I be an aid on this get? Because he was so concerned of embarrassing him, he told the sefer, yeah, you sign, and I'll get one more person to sign with you. That would be a problem, because the husband didn't authorize that. He was only authorizing him to write and not to sign. But according to Rabbi Yesi, that words cannot be given over to a shliach, it's great. There's no concern. You can't be concerned that there was such a story that the shliach was concerned about, because you can't give over through a shliach. It had to come straight from the husband's mouth. Obviously, the husband told him to sign. Wait a second. So from here you learn that even by Omer Amru, Rabbi Yesi does disagree. Because it explains the Gemara of Isa that if you think to say Rabbi Yesi, that Rabbi Yesi agrees like the Gemara is trying to say right now. But Omer Amru, when you tell someone to sell someone that it's kosher, then wait a second. How could you validate the signing of the sefer on the get? Nothing mechurva. Something destructive could happen. Because the concern that we just mentioned. The Zim and Damalushnaim, at times he could tell two people as Gitin Daf of Sang Zayin Manal. Imru l'sefer v'yichtav. Okay, you know what? Do me a favor. Tell that scribe, I like that scribe. I want to give him panasa. Tell him to write the get. And I like these two people, I trust them. And I want those two people to sign. Now, what's going to happen is now this guy, the shliach, he's embarrassed. He's going to tell him just to write and not to sign. So what he's going to do is a michtabi chad mahanach sahadi. He's going to have one of the two people that the husband said to sign. V'seif about that, and the second witness will say, "Oh, you signed the second witness." Now the problem is the husband didn't say this, and since the husband didn't say this, that would invalidate the get. So wait a second, it would be possible. The fact that we're saying it's kosher with chasam sefer, with the signing of the scribe, obviously is because Rabbi Yossi holds that you can't say oima amru, because if you would, then you would have this concern. So we fall off this principle that the Gemara is trying to say that oima amru, that would work. That's not a problem. We were trying to say that Shmuel's suffix was, what does it mean when he tells him yichtabu to write? It doesn't mean the signing of the witnesses. It doesn't mean writing the text. The Gemara wants to say, obviously it means that writing the text, because how even if it means just the writing, but how could it work the text? You're going to be telling someone else, and that's mili. So I said, no. Mili could be mimsal l'shluch if you tell him to tell someone else, and when you tell him just to sign, you obviously tell him to someone else to write it. But the Gemara said Rabbi Yossi doesn't agree with Oima Amru. We just proved right now that he holds from the Mishnah Pei Zayin, Chasam Sefer Sheninu, that we're not concerned that the shliach would have had such a situation because you could not have a shliach. Because if you could have a shliach, you could run into this problem. So you see, even by Oima Amru, Rabbi Yossi holds not going to work. So the Gemara says,
How about you saying Chasam Sefer Sheninu?
no, that we'll see over there why they said not Ksav Sefer versus Chasam Sefer, where why because would it work with just one witness, or do you need to have two witnesses? Question is, what is the scribe doing? Is he writing? Is he signing? That we'll see over there why. But the purpose of what we're trying to say is, if you hold Chasam Sefer Sheninu, then you might run into a problem, because what this scribe who signed did the husband really authorize him to sign? Maybe it was just out of shame that he didn't want to embarrass the scribe. He told him to write it. And you would have the concern. So why is it kosher? It should be possible. Oh, I'll tell you why it's kosher. Because you cannot have anyone tell someone else to sign. It has to come straight from the husband. Obviously the husband told him. But that's the case of Oima Amru, telling him to tell. And you still see Rabbi Yossi hold that wouldn't work. So that falls off what we're trying to answer for Shmuel, that, he could have a suffix regarding what yichtabu is, because the mili could be mimsur l'shliach by case of Oima Amru. So the Gemara says, no. Kivan Amar, since the master, referring to Rav, says later on the sugya, regarding the case of when you tell a scribe to write, which is really Oima Amru, and you tell such and such a person to sign, that kosher, it's going to be valid to get, it's just below Sasakin B'Yisrael, you shouldn't do such a thing in the Jewish people, as we'll see over there. So lo shchiach. So therefore, we're not geyser because it's not common, but it would be kosher. So we see that Oima Amru would be kosher, it just wouldn't be done. And since it shouldn't be done, it's not common, so we don't have to be concerned for that. The whole thing here is a concern. So the Gemara says, okay, but you still have to have the following concern. Maybe he said to two people, tell the scribe to write, and you sign. Now, that the Gemara tells us later on, that's kosher and it could be done. Now, if you're going to validate the signing of the scribe in the get, but you have the problem, because maybe these people went mishum kisuba to say because of the shame of the scribe, and he had the scribe sign with one of them, and it wasn't both of them. Didn't say that. Obviously, that we don't say amru kosher according to Rabbi Yossi, because if you did, you would run into the problem. He tells two people that you sign, which that we said that could be done. Some they said no, hanami, that case is also kosher v'leisasu. That's also, and we'll see this later on, what this case is talking about. That's kosher, also shouldn't be done, and therefore we're not concerned with that. The Gemara says, wait a second, that only works according to the one who says, later on the sugya, kosher v'leisasu, that's valid and shouldn't be done, so we're not concerned with that case. According to the one that says kosher, and it could be done. What are you going to say? How are you allowing the sefer to sign? But if you hold Oima Amru as kosher, then you're going to run into that problem that maybe they told him to sign, and really he never told him to sign. So the Gemara concludes like this. Ella, most definitely, Rabbi Yossi Tarti Amr. Rabbi Yossi was saying two different cases that are going to be puzzle. And that's whether the halacha of our Mishnah, when you tell three people to give, or whether when you tell a case of Imru Leplani, what we call Imru Amru, to write, and such person to sign, which is the Mishnah of Pezayin Mabez, he says by both of them it's going to be puzzle. We have a Maram later on that have a disagreement regarding if it could be done or not be done in the case of Amru Amru. That says Rashi, that's obviously according to Meir that they have this machlekes, who he validates Amru Amru, when you tell to tell. But according to Rabbi Yossi, it would be totally puzzle. Now, the maskana is that according to Rav Chizda, that it says over there, Chasam Sefer is kosher, Rabbi Yossi, that you don't have to be concerned that maybe the shliach had commanded and not the husband, because you always need to have the husband. That's according to Rabbi Yossi. But the Shmuel that he said previously at the Batzarch Talmud, that if Kesaybu means that their own handwriting, their signature, that means to say if the get is written by someone else, that's the cipher, that's Ka'ima Amru, that's going to be kosher. How's that going to work? Rabbi Yossi holds Ka'ima Amru is possible. Says the Gemara, Sabala Kabasei B'chada. You're right. Although Shmuel had passing like Rabbi Yossi, that's where the whole Gemara's question was coming from. Shmuel's halach Rabbi Yossi in the halach of our Mishnah, where you then say Ka'ima Amru. But he disagrees with him regarding the case of Amru, that if you're going to say that Kasayva means Ksav Yadan, right, only your signature, and therefore that means to say that the writing of the actual text of get could be done by a cipher, which would be Amru, and that we say, hey, that's going to be kosher, because obviously that's his suffix, and he said, Talmud, yes, it would be kosher, because on that halacha, Shmuel disagrees with Rabbi Yossi, and he holds that it would be kosher. Thank you to any time.